If you're in the market for a new iPhone, you've come to the right place because we're going to go through everything you need to know about buying an iPhone. Because Apple have just thrown a curveball our way by adding the iPhone 16e to the iPhone 16 lineup, meaning there's now three different iPhone 16s. You can also still get the iPhone 15, the iPhone 14, and you can even get 12s and 13s renewed and refurbished. So, what do you need to consider when you're going to buy a new iPhone? Hello, my name is Pete. This is the Studio Live Today podcast. My goal around here is to help you create, record, and release your best music. And I know you might be saying, well, how does choosing an iPhone relate to that? Because a lot of the recording I do is using the Apple ecosystem on the Mac, on the iPad, the iPhone becomes a very important, not only productivity tool, but creation tool as well. If, like me, you like creating on the go, grabbing your iPhone and taking it with you and recording things in the voice memos, or jotting down ideas for new songs, or using GarageBand to start the process for a brand new song, all these things are important, and having yourself a companion phone is important for you to do those things. So, what's new and what do you need to consider? Well, look, let's cut to the chase. If you got all the money, buy a Pro. The iPhone 16 Pro has the highest specs. It definitely has everything that you will possibly need. The A18 Pro chip, all of the cores, all of the neural engines, three camera system with the Fusion camera, the ultra wide, and the telephoto camera. It's got it all. Honestly, if money is no object, go ahead and buy yourself a 16 Pro. But I don't know about you, but money is an object for me. And to be honest, this iPhone 16 is on loan from Apple right now, but it's what I would buy. I would sit here in the middle and buy the 16 right now because it's got enough of the features without being super expensive, but it doesn't have some of the things missing that the 16e now has. And don't worry, we're going to explain all of this as we go through here. Before we dive in and compare the 16 Pro, 16, and 16e, which we're going to do in detail in a moment, I wanted to give you an alternative option. Yes, so if you would like to pick yourself up a new iPhone, buying it through Apple is a choice. Buying through your phone carrier is a choice, but you can also buy from third-party resellers. And I am an Amazon partner, which means that if you buy using the links in the description via Amazon.com, they will break off a chunk and send it to me. So full disclosure up front about that. But I've actually bought quite a few phones, and I've done it through Amazon.com. Why? Because Amazon have really good return policies and they have really good delivery options. So you can just get your stuff, especially if you're a Prime member, but even if not, you can get your stuff delivered and it all works really well. Look, some people aren't going to love Amazon. You do you, boo. More power to you. But here's a cool thing you can do. If in Amazon.com or your country equivalent, you search for iPhone renewed, you're going to find yourself a lot of these very, very affordable iPhones because there are companies out there that what they do see is they buy iPhones and then they refurbish them or what they call renewing them. So you're going to get yourself the benefits of having a phone, say a 13 or a 14 or a 15 or a 12, that's not going to cost you anywhere near as much as a brand new phone. Now, as you're looking at these prices that I'm scrolling down through here, these aren't going to always be the same. These are indicative. And you do want to make sure that you get an unlocked phone, regardless of where you buy it from. Yeah, your phones can be locked to a carrier. So this is why I recommend Amazon as opposed to Dodgy Brothers secondhand phones, because you know that with Amazon, you got a good return policy. If something goes wrong with it, if it doesn't work, if it breaks in the first week, you can return it because Amazon returns are actually really good. And yeah, you've got that support knowing that they're going to be unlocked. So look for renewed and unlocked. Now, Amazon also sell brand new phones. So yeah, you don't have to buy them directly through Apple. If, again, like me, you use Amazon for a lot of your purchases, buying even a brand new iPhone 16, 16 Pro, Pro Max, all the rest of it. Yeah, you can do all of that through Amazon as well. So if you just search iPhone 16, for instance, yeah, you do get a few other things in here. And what I will let you know is over here on the left, make sure that under brands, you select Apple. And down here under the new, under the condition, put new. Otherwise, you will get those used or renewed ones included in there as well. So that's a couple of options that you have if you want to save yourself a little bit of coin. And once again, those are affiliate links. If you use the links in the description of this video or over on my gear guide, they are affiliate links. They'll break off a small chunk and send it to me. So what options do we have here? Well, I'm here on the iPhone model comparison. So to get to here, you want to come in here to your iPhone, and then up the top here, you've got all the different models. Now, they've actually removed the 14, so they quietly retired the 14 now that they've got the 16e, as well as the iPhone SE. So those were actually both kind of replaced by the 16e. So all we've got here on the Apple website is those four models: 16 Pro, 16, 16e, and iPhone 15. To compare any of these, we just click on this compare button, and this is my favorite page on all of Apple because it gives you everything. Now, I'm on the US site. I know I'm not from the US. You've probably gathered that by my accent, but I use the US site for comparison because the vast majority of you folks are in the US and or Canada. If you're in the UK, Australia, any other place, just go to your local Apple website, and the only real difference you'll see is these prices because you'll be seeing them in your particular currency. Now, this is the obvious difference between these three models. They start now at just $599, which is a nice thing. I mean, the SE, the iPhone SE used to start at $429. So yes, it was a cheaper device. So now your absolute base model is going to be $599. Your 16 starts at $799, and your iPhone 16 Pro, in fact, that's the Pro Max. Let's go back to the Pro just for absolute comparison, starts at $999. So it's like one of those marketing things where you're like, yeah, you've got the small, medium, and large, and it's like best value. Most people go for this one. And that, again, without just cutting to the chase, which I already did, that is what I would go with. I would go with the 16 for most folks most of the time. Let's, however, keep continuing down here and look at all of the comparison of all of the features. And then we will circle back and go, how much better are these than your iPhone 15s and 14s and earlier models anyway? So let's start with the display. So your iPhone 16 Pro's got the 6.3 inch. You can also get the 6.7 inch if you go to the Pro Max, or of course the iPhone 16 Plus. They are going to be the larger size screens. So if you do want a bigger screen, you do pay a little bit more. As you see there, you go up $100 from the 16 to the 16 Plus. And if you go from the Pro to the Pro Max, you go up $200 for that larger screen size. So that's kind of your first decision. Do you want a 6.1, a 6.3, or a 6.7 inch screen? I've used them all. I'm currently using a Plus. It's a little bit overkill, but yeah, when I buy my own phones, again, this is on loan from Apple, full disclosure, I tend to go the standard 6.1 inch size. It just feels like a good size for me. Some of your older phones still have the mini size, so if you like those 4.7 inch sizes, you can still pick those up renewed. We'll look at those a little later. So what is the difference here? Your ProMotion and your always on display. That's on the Pro. You don't get that on your standard iPhone 16 or 16e. If you've never played around with that, that's that display where it goes down to like 1 hertz refresh rate, and it just has like the time or the date or just something simple on there. I had that on the 15 Pro that I used. I didn't like it. I turned it off. But if it's something you want, you can go for that. The ProMotion technology just gives you those super smooth looking screen display when you've got video and things going on there. In terms of the glass, you've got titanium with textured matte glass back, and then you've got with the 16, you've got the aluminium with the color infused glass back, and then with the 16e, because the 16e, bearing the lead here, only comes in black and white. So if you want color, if you want a colorful phone, you're going a 16 or a 16 Pro. Now, these are all just obviously at this point, just visual things. We will get to the power, the processing, and the other stuff as we go through. A cool thing is that they've all got the action button. And yes, all of them support Apple Intelligence. In case you've been living under a rock, Apple have been heavily pushing their AI, which they've kind of rebranded and reclaimed as Apple Intelligence from artificial intelligence. So they all are enabled for Apple Intelligence. But as you see here, as you go up from 16E to 16 to 16 Pro, you go from the A18 chip to the A18 Pro, and you also, whilst all of them have 6 cores of CPU, that's your central processing unit, the main powerhouse running all of your applications, your GPU, which covers your graphics, goes from a 4 core to a 5 core to a 6 core. So this is kind of the first difference that you don't see from the outside, which is why I wanted to do this guide so that you know this. Because if you just said, hey, why would I get the 16 when the 16E has the exact same chip? Well, put an asterisk next to that because it doesn't have the exact same chip. It has a very similar chip, but you have one less GPU core. Now, is that going to make a massive difference to the vast majority of what you do? No, not really. But it is worth considering, especially if you're doing graphic intensive stuff, if you're doing high-end video editing, a 4K video, 8K video, you're playing high-end games or things like that, you will want to keep that in mind. Now, you don't get the camera control. The camera control is the button that you have here on the 16 and the 16 Pro. That is, you press the button and the camera pops straight up, and then you can slide and swipe from side to side to be able to do different things with the camera. I don't like it, and I don't use it. So for me, that wouldn't be a reason to get a 16 instead of a 16E. But if you thought that looked cool, you can go with it. Camera, yes. So this is going to be huge. This is the real difference. If there's one thing that defines the key difference between a 16 Pro, a 16, and a 16E, and even from going back and getting earlier generations, the 15, 14, 13, 12, SC, etc., it's your camera. The camera is king. Like when it comes to smartphones, we use our cameras all the time. It's probably the most used feature of a smartphone. So what then are the differences? Well, obvious ones are 3, 2, 1. So you've got the 3 cameras, the Pro camera system on the iPhone 16 Pro. You've got 2 cameras on the 16. You've got just one, but they call it their fusion camera. Their 2-in-1 camera system on the 16E. What does that mean in real terms? What can you and can't you do? Well, obviously you lose out on that ultra wide and the telephoto that you get from the other phones, which means you can't do things like macro photography. It also means you don't get things like spatial photos and videos. You don't get the cinematic mode. You don't get action mode. So if the camera is important, if you buy a phone for the camera and then everything else secondarily, you'll want the 16 Pro or at least the 16. The 16E will be great for a daily driver of someone that just wants to take those snaps, those happy snaps, those photos for the Instagrams, then you'll be absolutely fine. But if you really want the best quality photos, yeah, you are going to want to upgrade to a 16 or a 16 Pro. Another obvious feature that you'll notice when you look at the actual 16E is it doesn't use the dynamic island. It uses the older style notch, and that actually impacts the entire screen, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But you don't get the dynamic island, that nice little island in the middle of your phone. It's notchy, so it's like the previous versions, like your 13s and your 12s and your 11s. It has the notch there as well. All of your emergency SOS stuff is all very much the same. Weirdly, you'll notice here up to 26 hours video playback. It's actually almost on par with the Pro here because it has a bigger battery in there. Because of some of the things that have been removed or changed between the 16E and the 16, you actually get better battery life, which is a little bit strange that you pay less and you can use it for longer. But we'll explain what that is and what's missing as we go through. You still have your 5G, and it doesn't mention it here, but we'll get to it again. This has the new Apple C1 chip, which is Apple's own modem. They used to use Qualcomm modems, in fact, still doing the 16 and 16 Pro, but this is the first time that Apple have used their own silicon, their own chip, their own modem chip. And modem, you might be thinking, modem? Why am I using a dial-up modem? Modem just means the cellular modem, so that connects to your 5G, your 4G. That is now done by Apple, which is, there you go. Is a thing. You can see here you got a slightly different ceramic shield. It's not the latest generation. So again, it's basically using the screen from like a 13 or a 14 with your 16E. So you do have a lesser quality screen, or at least less advanced than the latest version. You do not have MagSafe charging. If you like, if you have one of those, like I do, those bedside little devices that you can whack everything on there and your phone magnetizes on there with MagSafe, that will not be the case if you get a 16E. You can still use Qi chargers, which are those little ones that aren't magnetic, but you just put your phone onto, and they're everywhere now. You're seeing them on aeroplanes and in airports and in public benches. I saw one the other day. So, yeah, you can still charge wirelessly, but the difference is your Qi charging only charges up to 7.5 watts, whereas your MagSafe can go up to 25 or even 30 watts. And that just means that Qi charging is highly inefficient, it generates quite a lot more heat, and it will charge your phone a lot slower. So if fast wireless charging is something that you really want, then guess what? You will want to go for a 16 or a 16E. Capacity wise, it's basically the same. 128, 256, 512. Only the Pro can go up to 1 terabyte. Let's talk about the display. We'll have a quick drink as we talk about the display. You'll see there that they all have the Super Retina XDR display. And even though you might, at a glance, think the 16E has very similar screen to the OLED screen of the 16, it's a little different. They both have HDR. The resolution is slightly different because of the change from the notch to the dynamic island. They still have the same contrast ratio, but when it gets down to the brightness, you don't get the same levels of brightness. You don't get that peak brightness. So your blacks aren't going to be as black and your brights aren't going to be as bright on your 16E screen. And that's simply because they're utilizing screen technology from a couple of generations earlier, as opposed to the brand new iPhone 16 screen. Size and weight, yeah, look, it's about the same. It's slightly smaller, which will be quite annoying because you won't be able to use any of your cases or accessories. The width is the same, the depth is the same, and it's slightly less weighty because it doesn't have some of those components. It's got the new modem, it doesn't have the charging, the MagSafe charging, so it's slightly less heavy. You got the same water resistance and dust resistance there. You've got Apple Intelligence. So you can use Apple Intelligence. We talked about the chip before. You get the A18, but it's not exactly the same, and we've already discussed that. And the camera. If you want to know all the differences of the camera, you can hit pause here now, but we've already talked about a lot of those. You basically just get a third as many cameras, two-thirds as many cameras, and all the cameras, which does make it quite easy to kind of think of the difference between them. And again, you don't get things like macro, spatial, and the night mode portraits and Apple Pro RAW that you only get on the iPhone 16 Pro. And if you don't know what Pro RAW is, you probably don't need it at the end of the day. Video recording, same sort of thing. That's those action modes, the spatial video and the cinematic mode. And you also only get the Pro Res up to 4K 120 frames per second on the 16 Pro. And once again, if that means nothing to you, don't worry about it. Here's the good news. If you're a selfie lover, front camera, exactly the same. So they're all using the same true depth 12 megapixel front camera. So whether you're on the Pro, the 16, or the 16E, you get the same thing there. Although what you will notice there is even though it's the same camera, you don't get, because of the processing power required for cinematic mode and ProRes mode, you don't get those on the 16E. So same camera, but because of the less powerful without the 18 Pro, you don't get some of those additional features there. Peace of mind is peace of mind. Now, we talked about this before, cellular and wireless. So you might be looking at that going, that looks about the same, except here's the thing. It's actually a different modem. It's the C1 chip in the 16E, and it's the Qualcomm chip in the 16 and 16 Pro. Now, what does that mean? Not a whole lot. It does mean you don't get the thread networking technology and ultra-wide band. So 5G ultra-wideband is available in some parts of the US. I'm not sure if they're available in Canada or Europe. We don't have it in Australia. It's very limited to only a few carriers and only a few cities, as far as I know. I don't have it, so I don't pay a lot of attention to it. But if you happen to know that you desperately need ultra-wideband UWB 5G, or you'll lose your mind, then you want a 16 or a 16 Pro. If you don't know what any of that means, you don't have to worry about it. All right, Face ID is all the same, Apple Pay, Apple Card, video calling, you got all of the same functionalities there. Audio playback, video playback, and bugger lugs there as well. The power and battery, as mentioned before, you've only got Qi, which is spelled QI, by the way. If you're thinking, why does he keep saying Qi? It says QI. It's QI, but it's pronounced Qi. Yeah, go figure. You only have Qi wireless charging. You don't have Qi 2. That's the other thing I didn't mention earlier, which is sort of the more advanced version of Qi charging, which can give you higher wattage. So really, it's almost like a last resort. Your wireless charging on your 16E should not be used for your daily charging. It should only be if you desperately need to get a top up, because it's only going to be at 7.5 watt and it doesn't support a lot of the newer standards. However, because of that larger battery, because you have no MagSafe, because you have the new Apple modem in there, they've expanded things out and they've had room for a slightly larger battery. Now, Apple don't tell you the size or the actual details of the battery, so we kind of have to guess with that. We don't know the milliamp hours or anything like that, but they say it's bigger. Someone will tear one of these apart and they'll tell us that. Sensors, you have a LiDAR scanner in your Pro, but you don't in the others. If you don't know what a LiDAR scanner is, you don't need one. It's basically a scanner that can get the depth of things. So if you're doing 3D scannings and 3D models, you can use the 16 Pro and the LiDAR scanner to do that. If you don't, you don't need to. SIM card is all the same. You can still use SIM cards in most parts of the world, except where you can't. And you can use dual SIM or eSIM. An eSIM, which is the E version of SIM cards, the non-physical SIM cards are becoming much more popular around the world. So the vast majority of the time, you'll be connecting to a network using an eSIM. I think I've almost got all of my family and all my devices onto eSIMs now, which is very nice, because when they shift phones, there's none of that getting the little tool and popping out the tiny card and making sure you don't scratch it and then putting it in the other one, then clicking it in and then realizing you forgot to turn it off and on before you did it and hoping you didn't break it. Yeah, it just connects. It does it all automatically. The connector. Now, USB-C. But here's the thing. The 16 and the 16E only support up to USB 2 speeds. And I mentioned this when the 16 Pro and 16 first came out, that if you are connecting things like high-capacity storage devices like SSD drives or high-capacity throughput USB-C devices, you'll want the Pro, because it actually is the only one that supports USB 3 speeds. So yeah, despite the fact that all of these phones have USB-C, USB-C doesn't mean fast. It's the connector type. It just means that they have that connector type that is the universal connector, as opposed to Lightning that we had on previous phones. So yeah, if you need a faster connection, go with that. You can get more of the tech specs down the bottom here, and all of the fine print, which we won't be reading through. So that is absolutely everything. If you were wondering, if you were sitting there going, I don't think that the Apple announcement gave me all of the detail about this new phone, I think there's probably some things hidden under the hood. I sure as heck hope John's breaks down in excruciating detail. Well, now we've done that. Now, I mentioned earlier that you do have other options here. So let's fire up a couple of those, because you'll see here we've got our new phone models. We've got more phone models here. So if we wanted to compare this, because some of you may be on the fence, you might be thinking 16E, but couldn't I pick up a renewed 15 or maybe even a renewed 14 or even earlier and get some of those benefits over the 16E? Well, that's why I thought we would have a little look at this here now. Quick drink, and we'll continue on. So you might be thinking right here off the bat, 15 versus 16E, why would I buy older technology for more money? Because it's $699 versus $599. Now, the reason the 14 doesn't have a price is that you have to buy it through authorized resellers. So you can still get it at, here in Australia, we have places like Officeworks and JB Hi-Fi. If you're in the US, like Circuit City, if they still exist, or your phone carrier may have the older iPhones. But let's come down here and just see why you might want these. So everything's pretty similar here. No action button. And instead of the action button, you have the ring silent switch there. You go from an A16 Bionic chip to an A18 chip. That's a pretty big jump. You'd be looking at that going, why would I do that? But the GPU, you actually have an extra core on the A16. You cannot use Apple Intelligence though, so keep that in mind. The camera. So you do actually get a dual camera system on both the 14 and the 15. Now, do they do much else apart from having things like the ability to shoot ultra wide? No, not really. Are they better than the two-in-one 48 megapixel fusion camera? It's debatable because the extra processing power that can do things like the visual intelligence can actually help you out. But if you need that wide angle, if you want to go to that 0.5x, you won't be able to do that on the 6E. So if you want to be able to zoom out as opposed to zoom in, the ultra wide camera is what you want, and you only have that on the full models, not the 16E. The other thing is you get dynamic island. So the 15E has a slightly more modern look to the screen there. So all the other things are pretty similar. Your battery life is a lot better. You've got USB-C on the 15. Don't forget that the 14 and earlier are Lightning. So if you want USB-C, you need to go with a 15 or a 16. 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, etc. They all use Lightning. Now here's the thing, they support the same speed, as you can see there. That's kind of the thing that a lot of folks miss, is that when Apple went from Lightning to USB-C, they didn't increase the speed. I know. Go figure. All the rest of it, yep, all fairly similar. You do get MagSafe charging. So you can get MagSafe 15 watt up to 20 watt adapter MagSafe charging with the 15 and the 14. So that's another tick in the column for a 15 or a 14 there. Your display. So you can see here that you've got the different resolution display there on the 15. But what you may notice there is look how similar the 14 and the 16E are. It's almost as if the 16E uses the screen from the 14. And I've buried the lead here because it does. It's the exact same screen. You can see there the resolution, the contrast ratio, everything is identical. It uses the notch as opposed to the dynamic island. It's the 14 screen. So if you get a 15, it's a better screen than the 16E. It just is because it's using the newer screen technology. Size and weight's very similar, and a lot of the other things here. Apple Intelligence, you'll know it if you need it. We've talked about the chip. Obviously, it's a newer chip. Newer doesn't always mean better, but it usually does. The cameras we've talked about in detail there. Same with your video recording. Here's the interesting thing. Your 14s and your 15s can do cinematic. They can do action mode. If you are getting a phone for video recording and it's between a 15 and a 16E, I'd get a 15. Dynamic island, MagSafe charging, action mode, cinematic mode, a better screen. Like it is still a better phone for a lot of things. The reason that most people won't go the 15, they'll go the 16E is because they'll just think that the A18 is better than the A16. And it is, and especially if you want the Apple Intelligence stuff and you want to be future-proofed, sure, I get it. But I wouldn't write off a 15, especially at this point in time. And it will only get cheaper with the 16E coming out. Getting a renewed or refurbished 15 or 14 is going to end up costing you quite a bit less. There you go. You can see the difference there again, that you don't have the ultra wideband in the 16E. You have the original ultra wideband in the 14 and the second gen ultra wideband in the 15. So that has been removed. They all use Face ID. Everything else is all the same. So if you are looking for a cheaper phone, I honestly think that a 15 or a 14, especially when you start jumping in here and seeing the prices, you can get things like iPhone 14 Pro Maxes for about $640 there. You can get an iPhone 14 Plus, the bigger one, for $400 there. Yeah, you start looking at these and you think, hey, there's some good deals there. So don't forget, you can check those out. I'll put links in the description. Now, what about even earlier models? What about the 13 and the 12? Are they even feasible in 2025? Are these something that you would want to check out? Well, yeah, because look at this. Your 13 and your 14 use exactly the same chip. In fact, I bought my daughter a 13 at a very, very good price just recently because it's very comparable. If you don't care about the Lightning versus the USB-C, you still get the A15 Bionic chip with 6-core CPU, 4-core GPU. You get a lot of bang for your buck these days with an iPhone 13 or even an iPhone 12. So there's we won't go through all of these in detail, but yeah, it's Lightning. It's still got Face ID though. It's still got MagSafe charging. You still got all those different ranges of sizes that you can use there. The screens again, yep, these will look very similar. The iPhone 13 screen, look at that. It's very similar to the iPhone 14 screen. So yes, once again, the 13, 14, and 16E all use the exact same screen. They all use the exact same OLED 6.1-inch diagonal screen with the notch. So if you're thinking the 16E is all new and fancy, and someone's telling you that you got to buy the 16E, maybe just slip in there that did you know that they use the same screen on the iPhone 13 as they're using on the 16E? So it's basically a 3-year-old screen at this point in time. Not a bad thing. Hey, recycle your stuff. If they've got those around, I like it. Let's not throw them away. Let's reuse them. So yeah, the rest of it we've kind of already talked about. Your cameras are all going to be slightly improved in the 14, but the 13 and the 12 still have some pretty good cameras. They've all got the dual system with the ultra wide camera. So even your iPhone 12 is going to do ultra wide, whereas your 16E does not. So there's definitely still some life in those older iPhone models. And don't forget that everything from the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and even the SE3, that they all still support iOS 18. So you're going to be able to use the latest operating system. And even your slightly older phones, your 10s and your 8s and your 7s, they're stuck on iOS 17, but that's still secure and still a modern operating system that works quite well. So you've got options there if you wanted to go with that. So let's summarize. Let's go back to our iPhone 16. If you wanted, we'll go with the Pro Max this time. iPhone 16 Pro Max, iPhone 16 Plus, and iPhone 16E. If you wanted to spend all the money, of course, you can jump in here and for, where's the sizes down here? For $1,599, you can get an iPhone 16 Pro Max with a terabyte of storage space. Or for $599, you can get an iPhone 16E with 128 gigabytes of storage. So you'd probably want to increase that. For most folks, especially if you're taking video or using like camera, or especially for us audio geeks that want to create GarageBand projects and the like, you'll probably want to increase that to at least 256 gigabytes of storage, if not 512. I use 512 on my phones. It's kind of the happy sweet spot for the amount of storage, even if you are using a Pro. So what do you think? Will you be racing out there to buy the new 16E? Have I convinced you that some of those older phones might be worth looking at? Or maybe if you're sitting there with a 13 or 14 and you're thinking, I've actually got a pretty decent phone still, because guess what? You do. Yes, I know the FOMO's there, the fear of missing out, but keep in mind that your phone will run the latest iOS 18 and you'll have a good phone for at least a few years to come. You don't need to rush out and replace your phone every year. That being said, you're in the market for one, don't forget you can check out the links in the description, check out Amazon, and even check out the Apple Store. You can go in there. They often have refurbished gear. Quite often not phones, though, because they don't tend to do that. They'll recycle the phones, but you can always ask. But remember, when you're buying secondhand or used products, make sure you buy from a reputable retailer. Make sure you get some sort of warranty and that the returns process is quick and easy, which is why I use Amazon for that. Thanks for watching this one. I'd love to get your feedback. If you've got comments about this, leave them down below. If you enjoyed this one, if you got some value out of going into the detail, into the weeds, hit the thumbs up button. And I will see you next time here on the Studio Live Today podcast.